I'm going to introduce Igal Nathaniel, who is the FIP board member responsible for, who was given responsibility for the experimental first aid cover class. Igal is going to say a few words before we start the actual program. The actual program seems congested, but what we're going to try and do is between each of the sections to have a break so you can go get coffee and do whatever you need to do. So it seems a busy, congested schedule, but there will be breaks through the afternoon. I would suggest saving questions and discussion until the end, simply because we do have a fair amount to cover during the day. There are also two of the speakers will be on Zoom. Hopefully the technology will work smoothly, so bear with us if there are any problems that arise. So Igal.
Good afternoon to everybody here, and dear friends and colleagues. In December 24, I attended the FIP exhibition in Shanghai when I was in China to participate in a FIP board meeting. It was there that I encountered the FIP experiment first day cover class for the first time. Seeing the large number of enthusiasts studying this exhibit, I immediately appreciated the growing worldwide interest in the collecting first day cover, and I felt that this important and developing field deserved proper recognition within FIP exhibitions. I brought the matter before the FIP board, and after their approval, I was honored to be nominated to coordinate the development of this class. FDC exhibits are extremely popular in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the United States, and several Asian countries, particularly China and in India. However, the approach and the practice to collecting and exhibiting FDCs have developed differently in each country. It's become clear to me that to move forward at the international level, we need to adopt a flexible system and common guidelines while respecting the established practice between countries. Together with Colin Fraser, I studied the subject in depth, and we formed an international work group made up of experienced first day cover collectors and exhibitors from different parts of the world. The members of the groups are Mr. Brian Cullen from Ireland, Mr. Huang from China, Mr. Colin Fraser from United States, myself, Igal Nathaniel from the FIP, Mr. Charles O'Brien from USA, Mr. Frank Power from Australia, and Mr. Tony Thackeray from New Zealand. We held several Zoom meetings and worked in a very positive and cooperative spirit until we finalized draft guidelines for the FDC class. I am pleased to say that the final guidelines were approved by the FIP board. From now on, a first day cover exhibit will be judged according to this new regulation, and collectors in all countries are encouraged to follow them when preparing their exhibit. The first experimental first day cover class under these guidelines will take place at the Boston 2026 exhibition. Today's seminar has been organized to help prepare both exhibitors and jurors for this new class and for the important step we are taking together. The seminar includes 2 sessions, one devoted to first day cover exhibiting and the other to first day cover judging. At the end, there will be time for questions and discussion. I sincerely hope that the work we have done and the experimental class in Boston 2026 will become So will become significant step together toward the full recognition of First Day cover exhibit as an official class in national and international exhibitions. As you hear later this afternoon, I am pleased to announce a membership program comprising experienced collectors, exhibitors, and judges from First Day covers who are available to assist those with an interest in exhibiting in the new class. Before I conclude, I would like to warmly thank the members of the working groups who devoted their time and knowledge to the project, as well as the FIP board for their confidence and support in approving the experimental class. In addition to these members of the work group, I wish to express my special thanks to Mr. John Hotchner from the United States for this valuable advice and for taking responsibility for matters related to judging. I wish all of you a very fruitful, interesting, and successful seminar. Thank you very much. Now I give the microphone to Colin Fraser.
Thank you very much, Igal. Thank you for the introduction. And we have a little time to catch up. So I tend to speak quickly. We will go through the slides very quickly. The slides are meant to be a visual aid rather than deeply intellectual. So for those of you who really do know First Day covers, it may seem a little superficial, but the idea is to really broaden people's understanding of what First Day covers are, the history of First Day covers, and why we're now at this point of moving towards an FIP class. At this point, it is an experimental class, which has lots of small print explaining that it's not a full class, it's a part class, but it's unfortunately a transitional stage which one has to go through in order to establish a full FIP class. So it's a long road, but as I said on a talk for Mi Oficina, I said off the record, hopefully it will not take as long as it's taking postcards to eventually become an FIP class. So far, I think they're 10 years into it. Hopefully we will be a lot quicker than that. So, the program for today, it was up on the original slide. Can you change the slide? It was up on the original slide, but basically, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history and some of the key details of First Day covers. And then Ying from China, who is a very active collector of First Day covers in China, but also has a fairly broad understanding of First Day cover exhibiting in the United States. He will talk something about his personal experiences as a judge, as a collector, and as an exhibitor of First Day covers. So it will be a personal explanation of how he has evolved as a collector and as an exhibitor of First Day covers. After that, I will say a little bit about the transition into the experimental class, how it's come about. Igal touched a little bit on it in his introduction. I will go into somewhat more detail. Then John Hotchner, who is a very, very experienced US national and international judge, also a collector of First Day covers, will talk about the guidelines and the structure of judging that will apply in Boston and hopefully in the future for further exhibitions, including the First Day cover class. At the end, there'll be a short presentation on informational sources for those who are interested in First Day cover collecting and exhibiting. And then hopefully there'll be some questions for those who actually have managed to survive the 5 hours of the event. So, it's changing the slide. Let's move to a little bit about the context of collecting and exhibiting First Day covers. As Igal suggested, can you change the slide? As Igal suggested, actually First Day covers are a very popular area of collecting around the world. Maybe not as popular in Europe as it is in South America and North America, nor as popular as it is in Asia. But it does have a fairly strong worldwide following and worldwide interest. Under Igal's leadership, the FIP established a working group as he mentioned, with members from Australia, China, Ireland, New Zealand, and the United States. Now, why did we end up with such an international group? Well, one of the problems that we had to deal with was preparing guidelines. And the guidelines had to be prepared under a fairly short deadline for Boston. And one of the other problems is that many of the FIP judges have little experience of first day covers. They've never collected them, they've never judged them. For many of them, it's a closed book. And so we had to look beyond the immediate ideas of FIP judges and where we could find what we believe to be the most well-conversant people with the concepts. So we put together the working group and we prepared the guidelines, and these are now published on the Boston 2026 website. Now, changing the slide again. I told you the slides are going to change quickly, so you guys can't take a break in the back there. So, myths and misconceptions about first day covers. As I warned you, we would have some technical glitches. So, I was saying about common myths and misconceptions about first day covers. If I actually went around and pointed at each of you and said, what is your idea of what a first day cover is? What is your idea of what a first day cover is? Most of you, I think, would say, well, it's a modern commemorative cover, it's got a picture on it, and it's probably from the last 20 years. Well, that would probably be most people's conception of what a first day cover is. The reality is, it is somewhat broader than that. It is a much more extensive history. There is a much broader time period. There's a much broader geographical period that first day covers embrace. Now, there have always been, in fairness, prejudices and, shall we say, personal preferences about first day covers. The late Stanley Phillips, who lived between 1891 and 1954, he called first day covers, when he wrote in the 50s, a craze, and I hate to say, something with nothing to recommend it. He was clearly not enthusiastic about first day covers. So, partly, this is something that the working group have sought to overcome. We want to try and broaden people's perception of first day covers and create a better understanding of what the subject could include. Now, as with all the FIP classes, forming a good first day cover collection is not easy. Creating a good first day cover exhibit is also not easy. So if we can change the slides. So let's take a little look at the historical and background to first day covers. One of the first areas you've got to consider is the balance between two ideas, a first day cover and an earliest documented use. Down in the front row here, we have a collector, exhibitor, who's very knowledgeable about the whole idea of earliest documented uses. He has a fantastic exhibit of New Zealand, earliest documented uses on stamps and on covers. He was also one of the members of the working group. Now, I said, what is most people's conception of a first day cover? It's a modern envelope with a picture, a cachet, and a postmark. So let's take a little further look into some of these questions. Change the slide. So, a first day cover. On the screen, you can see what is effectively an attempt at a definition of a first day cover. Postal items, stamps on it, could be postal stationery, postmarked by the issuing authority. This was one of the questions that the working group had to address with the FIP. The FIP was very concerned about the balance between the activities of the postal authority and the activities of private individuals, stamp dealers, and individual collectors. Because many of the first day covers fall kind of within two areas. But the thing that was fundamental is that the cancellation of the postmark should be by the postal authority. As in terms of the cachet, we'll come to that later, but that was we could be a little more flexible. Now, earliest documented use. Now, you're probably saying, well, what's the difference? Surely it's the same. Well, many early stamp issues and many early items of postal stationery do not have an officially designated first day. So, you have to, at best, say, well, this is the earliest dated recorded example. And this is something that you, Tony, have worked with very extensively. There's even, in the literature section, there's Tony's book recording all those earliest documented uses. Now, if you look in exhibits, there's always, well, earliest known use, earliest documented use. It's like a rarity statement. There should be, behind a statement, there should be some verifiable publication or some published date that actually says this is the earliest documented use. Because Hussein might say, I have the earliest known cover from Qatar. Well, but known to whom? Who validated the fact that it's that earliest known cover from Qatar? You want something that documents, that in a sense substantiates the claim. So, changing the slide again. Let's look at first day uses. First day uses are basically the parent from which earliest documented uses come. First day covers are, you have a specific published date and it's corresponding with the postal authority saying this is the first day, these stamps are valid for postal purposes. So, moving forward, as I mentioned with Tony, some of these earliest uses may only be on stamps. That's something else to keep in mind. Now, first day covers. Where did first day covers first come from? Well, even in May 1840, the issuance of the penny black, the official first day of postal use was the 6th of May. And this cover was prepared by Robert Cole, who was a solicitor and a philatelist and a postal historian in London on the 6th of May, 1840. And if you read the notation in the top right corner, he notes the first day of the use of postage stamps, 6th of May, 1840. So for those of you who have this perception of first day covers as only modern cachet covers, think again. Now, changing the slide again, if we look here, US earliest documented uses, designated first days between 1847 and 1922. This list prepared by Henry Scheuer, all the way back to the 1847 issues, the designated first days. The designated first day of use for the 1851 3-cent, 1st of July, 1851, 43 covers known. Classic and early first day covers are frequently and have been frequently shown at international exhibitions. You may have to look long and hard to find them, but even without a first day cover class, classic first day covers have been included in exhibits. These are a couple of slides. This slide is from the collection of Takashi from Japan, his Grand Prix winning collection of Prussia. And you can see there the page from his exhibit showing 2 first day uses for the classic stamps of Prussia. Again, changing the slide. Again, another page from later in his exhibit. This is for the 1867 issue. Again, 2 first day uses. It's not just Prussia. Here we have Denmark. First day use, April 1851, of the 4 skilling of Denmark. Again, changing the slide. France, first issue of France, the very first postage stamps of France. The first day uses on the 1st of January, 1849. Again, my point, and the point I'm trying to make is, first day covers have a very long, well-established history. They are frequently shown in classic traditional exhibits. So it's only logical that eventually we should evolve towards a first day cover class. To repeat myself, which I do all the time, here we have Swedish early issues. This cover is actually shown in the frames several rows over in the traditional class for Europe. And the cover on the left is the second example. There are 2 examples known of this as a first day cover. So here you see both examples on the first day. First day uses of Swiss rayon issues. Again, let's change the slide. Now, As I mentioned with Tony's exhibit, and I'm sorry to use your exhibit as an example, but it's good you're here, and it actually provides a useful context. In many cases, with the early issues, we do not have a first day cover as such. So one of the other questions that the working group had to address is, how do you deal with issues for which there is no cover? In many cases, all we have is a loose stamp with a clear, legible, dated cancel from the first day. These are two examples which Klaus Arnott from Postal Union kindly gave me, the Spanish 6 cuartos and the French postage due, first postage due stamp, used on the first day. So within first day covers, not only should you expect complete covers, but in some cases it is necessary to include off-cover and loose stamps. Now, I talked about earliest documented uses and how and why earliest documented uses differ from first day covers. If we take the penny black, for example, if we take the Indian 1854 issue, both of these stamps were available prior to the first day on which they were valid for postal purposes. So they were available for sale. They were effectively not supposed to have been used to pay postage, but in some cases they were. The 1854 half ann of India, there are covers known as early as August. Wasn't supposed to be used until October. If we move to the next slide, here are two earliest documented uses of the penny black. 1st of May on the left, and the 2nd of May on the right. The one on the right is clearly dated on the front with the tombstone 2nd of May, 1840. The one on the left, where the penny black is tied, there's a debate as to whether it was accepted for postage or not accepted for the payment of postage, but it was used on the 1st of May. The two suggest that it was not accepted for postage, but that's something that people much smarter than I am debate. Now, again, changing the slide. First issue of France, I mentioned the first day was 1st of January, 1849. Well, again, the stamps were printed from the 4th of December, 1848 onwards. And here's a usage, unambiguously, on the 31st of December, 1848. The day before the postal rate came in, and the day before the stamp was officially valid for postage. So this is why you have this really important distinction between a first day and an earliest documented use. Now, again, moving through the slides, I mentioned that a number of issues do not have an officially designated first day. The 1851 3 cent, 1st of July. But that stamp comes in different types, different plates. And in certain cases, some of those plates were not available or are not recorded on the first day. So for example, this 1851 type 2 from plate 2, the earliest documented use is the 7th of January of 52. So again, drawing the distinction between first day and earliest documented use. Many of the early stamps of New Zealand that Tony talks about, both in his exhibit and in his catalog, there is no official day of issue. So his research, his studies on the earliest documented uses are the supporting facts behind those earliest uses. Now, we can beat the drum to death. We can keep going with early examples from classic exhibits. Walter Britz, in his Grand Prix large gold exhibit of Uruguay, earliest documented uses of the diligencias, shown here. Moving forward, from the later Sun issues, the 1859 60 cent. Again, earliest documented uses. And interestingly enough, this is not only the earliest documented Uruguayan stamp with an adhesive, it's also the earliest one with a date stamp. Double dipping in terms of an exhibit. Now, there are always complications. Things are not always as simple as one might hope. Colombian issue, the first day of sale, it was issued on the 1st of January, 1893. It was a Sunday. Most post offices were closed. So in this case, well, the 2nd of January suffices for the first day. So to every rule, every guideline, there's an exception. And this is an example of the exceptions. And again, if we change the slide. Now, this is where I'm going to change direction. The first point that I've been trying to make is that first day covers have a long history extending back into the classic period of philately. It is not just a product of the modern era. You go to the classic traditional exhibits, you will find first day covers. Now, as with all things, transitions take place. And first day covers from that classic period transition to the modern era. When did that modern era happen? Well, sometimes depending on the country and the place, 1920s, 1930s, 1940s. What did it kind of coincide with? Well, commemoratives and special stamps. That's one thing. They also coincided with a far more structured pattern of official dates of use by the postal authority. These things were codified, written down, and set in stone. We also started to see the introduction of cachets. We started to see the introduction of special and commemorative postmarks. All of these changes and all of these transitions were part and parcel of this move away from the classic period into what I'm terming the modern era. Different people might call it different things, but modern is a good word. Now, you've already changed the slide, thank you. Now, if we take Great Britain as an example, this Oswald Marsh first day cover for the George V 9penny. This is one of the examples of what I would identify as the transition towards the modern era. Oswald Marsh was a very renowned, very professional stamp dealer in the UK, died in 1951 at a young age, and he had a very early interest in first day covers, the issue of new printings of stamps of Great Britain and the British Commonwealth. And this is an example of one of his first day covers. Now, no cachet, no special postmark, but the date on the cancel is clear and legible, and this was the officially designated day of issue for this 9penny olive stamp. Now, again, if we move forward, from the 1940s and 1950s, from most countries, first day covers kind of look like this. They're essentially what look like commercial covers. But in each case, the date in the postmark, clearly legible, and clearly documented within postal records as being the date of validity for the stamp for postal purposes. And on the Rhodesia Nyasan cover on the right, you can see that the sender made a note, first day cover, July 1st, 1954. Now, it's not just Great Britain and British colonies. Here we have from Japan. This was also given to me by Takashi. It shows the first day cover for the 1937 10 cent from Japan. Now, cachets. I've mentioned the word cachets a lot so far, and you're going to hear even more about them. This is the earliest illustrated British first day cover. This is from the 22nd of June, 1911. Now, in most cases, a lot of these early modern period and even the classic period first day covers were essentially fortuitous commercial uses. They were not necessarily sent as, oh my goodness, I want a first day cover of this stamp. Somebody was sending a letter and it happened to be on that first day. This was the first time in the UK where a commemorative dated cachet was applied. It coincides with Coronation Day, but it also coincides with the first day of postal purpose of the halfpenny George V definitive. And this is kind of the introduction to this whole thing of illustrated covers and cachets. Now, repeating myself, and again, I apologize if I repeat myself, but I'm trying to make certain points, and oftentimes it's easier to come back and tackle the point from different directions because each of you will hear a different thing that I say, and I'm trying to convey as much information as possible, as quickly as possible. So, two things, the cachet and the postmark. Within the first day covers, for most people, the cachet is the primary focus. Especially if you collect American first day covers. America is one of the countries with the most voluminous number of cachet makers. Huge numbers of cachet makers. Most other countries do not have anywhere near the same number of cachet makers. The second aspect is the postmark. We need to be able to read the date to know that it corresponds with the date of postal validity for the stamp. So these are really, if you distill it down to its basic bare bones, it's the cachet and the postmark. You may not have a cachet, so that's optional, but you have to have the postmark clearly legible, and to repeat, it must be applied by the postal authority. Now, in many cases, artwork is available for the cachets. This is the Malawi 1974 angling issue, and these are some of the preliminary drawings that Michael Goeman prepared for the cachet for that first day cover. In America, we have all the Artmaster dies for printing the cachets on first day covers. This is, again, just an example. We also have the layout of the cover. This is all part of the production material. Courvoisier submitted 2 proposals to the Crown agents, and you can see how the 2 designs differ. The photographic essays, the postmarks, and the different layout for the envelopes. We also get production errors. We know all about production errors in stamps. Well, indeed, we get production errors in first day covers as well. In this case, the official post office first day cover for South Africa, in preparing some of the first day covers, they stuck the blocks of 6 upside down on the covers. It was a production error associated with the stamps and the first day cover. You can also get examples of missing colors, inverted cachets. All of these production errors that happen with stamps can also happen with first day covers. Again, if we move forward, thank you. Cachets. I said you would hear an awful lot more about cachets. Cachets can come in different forms, printed by different methods. And just on the slide here are a selection of the different potential elements of how they could be applied, lithography, photogravure, and so on. And even silk applied to the cover. Again, let's move forward. Hand-painted first day covers. This is something very unique, well, I don't say very unique to America, but it's certainly very special in America. Dorothy Knapp was probably one of the most talented artists in preparing hand-painted cachets. She also kind of has a slight sentimental attachment to me because she lived in a small town in upstate New York called Kingston, which is 8 miles from where I live in Woodstock. When she retired and she moved across the river to Rhinebeck, next to Bard College, where my daughter went to college. So to me, there's an attachment to Dorothy Knapp. But at the end of the day, she was a highly talented artist. She prepared very limited numbers of covers. And as John Hotchner told me, some of them are unique. Some of them are unique. Now, again, let's see how have cachets evolved over time? Well, in those early days, they were fairly simple. If you remember that Great Britain cover, it was just a little picture on the left. Today, as time has moved forward, the cachets on the covers have become more and more decorative, more and more extensive. And even in many cases, they completely cover the envelopes. Now, again, changing the slide, we have the question of the postal authority. And as I mentioned early on, this was one of the issues, and Igal, I apologize, and if I say something inappropriate, you'll correct me. It is probably the biggest obstacle that we had working with the FIP. For many people, they have the idea that the cachets should only be applied by the postal authority. Now, as I mentioned, and I'm repeating, in many cases, the cachets are prepared by dealers, by individual collectors. Dorothy Knapp was not a postal authority. In many cases, those early covers with cachets. The 1911 cachet was not prepared by a postal authority. But if you exclude all those first day covers not prepared by the postal authority, you dramatically diminish the scope and range of first day covers. And I'll say this, Igal, it is really important that we have to embrace not only the cachets of postal authorities, but also the cachets of private producers of first day covers. Let's just go through examples of some of the postal authority first day covers. We can go through these slides pretty quickly. You've got China, United States, Great Britain, prepared by the Great Britain Post Office, India, prepared by the Indian Post and Telegraphs, United Arab Emirates. All of these, whoops, go back one. All of these are prepared by the postal authority. But again, to every rule, there's an exception. And usually it involves Britain somehow. In the case of the former British colonies, most of the stamp production was controlled by the Crown agents. They were responsible for the designing, the selection of the new issues. They were responsible all the way through the production process. And they were also responsible for the first day covers. They were not the postal authority. So again, if you strictly apply the definition of prepared by the postal authority, these were not. So as I say, to every rule there's an exception. And this is why you have to take a fairly liberal interpretation of who generated the first day covers. You can see the one on the right is addressed to the Crown agents, and the one on the left, although not addressed to the Crown agents, was actually prepared exclusively by the Crown agents. The postal authority in the Federation of South Arabia had nothing to do with the design of the first day cover. So, we've talked a lot about commercially produced first day covers. I mentioned the different types of group who might be responsible for preparing them. And again, the point that I made earlier, different countries have different numbers, significantly different numbers of cachet makers. For certain countries, there are very, very few, and sometimes only one cachet maker. And indeed, it might be the postal authority, or it might not. In the US, Mike Zeiss, how many cachet makers are there over time in the US? 1,000, 1,500, how many? Tens of thousands. Tens of thousands of cachet makers. Nowhere else in the world do you have that number of cachet makers. So between different countries, amongst different countries, different places, the scope and range of material varies greatly. And this is actually quite an important point, because in terms of collecting and exhibiting, the number of cachet makers impacts what you can do with a collection and what you can do with an exhibit. Now, the difference, postal authority cachets, private cachets. Again, we can rattle through these pretty quickly. Australian commercial covers, Great Britain commercial first day covers, Hong Kong commercial first day covers, Indian commercial first day covers, Malayan commercial first day covers, and again, the exception to every rule, the hybrid. The hybrid. The one on the left was a joint venture between Occidental Petroleum and the Libyan government, the Libyan Post Office. Occidental funded, encouraged the issue. They were also responsible for the first day cover. And as you can see, it was great advertising for Occidental Petroleum. The one on the right, a collaboration between the Red Cross and the Postal Service. So there, again, to make a simple story complicated, there are hybrids. Now, generic cachets. You're all going to be sick and tired of hearing about cachets, I promise you that. Generic cachets are basically something to make the envelope look pretty, but don't really relate specifically to the stamp issue. Here are two different Great Britain Machin first day of issues, same cachet made by Stuart Covers. A generic cachet. Now, I would argue or suggest that from an exhibiting and collecting point of view, these are not so important. They really don't They don't add much either to a collection or to an exhibit, but they're out there. We also have genetic cachets. Winston Churchill, a couple of different generic cachets applied. Now, there are certain first aid covers that are good and certain first aid covers that are bad. And he's laughing because he knows where I'm going with this one. These American first aid covers have to be one of the greatest marketing jobs ever. You feel you're getting this incredible piece of 22 karat gold. And if you touch it and you feel it, it's in a little beveled case and it feels substantial. But if I threw it out there, it would fly through the air light as a feather. Skilled marketing. Do you want to collect these? Not really. Do you want to exhibit them? Please don't. You can buy them. They're readily available from dealers, probably around about 10 to 15 cents a cover. And if any of you are interested, I can make a few recommendations of places where you could probably buy them. Now, again, exceptions to every rule. Add-ons. This is something that has become, in recent times, an issue. Laser printing, hand painting illustrations can be added to plain unillustrated covers. Larry Gasson in Chicago, a very talented artist like Dorothy Knapp. He prepares quite a number of add-ons. The key thing is, the illustration is in no way contemporary with the use of the cover. But they are a feature of first aid covers. And it's important, you have to address the issue. They exist. Are they important in an exhibiting and a collecting point of view? Arguably, they have a role to play, but in moderation. Now, going back to my point about postal authority versus commercially produced first aid covers. Here's a random selection of first aid covers. A bunch of them are postal authority, and a bunch of them are privately produced commercial first aid covers. Do they look any different to you? No. So again, my point is, we have to embrace the postal authorities' activities, and we have to embrace the activities of the dealers, the collectors, and the other producers of the first aid covers. My argument is, it really doesn't matter who made them, but we want to know who made them, when, and how they were produced, just like in traditional philately. Now, again, to take another slightly different tack, a slightly different theme, first aid covers come in all shapes and sizes. Folders by the UN, whoops, we went a little quickly there, folders by India, rectilinear things, exhibition programs with first aids. The scope of size, format, shape is almost endless. And again, all of these come within the scope of first aids. Postmarks. Now, we talked about postmarks earlier. We'll just say a little bit more. They could be just the ordinary town date stamp of Bathurst on the Gambia. They could be fairly simple designs, first day of issue with a location. But again, to repeat, the most important thing is the date, clear, clean, and legible. Increasingly now, we've moved from plain town date stamps to more decorative designs. Again, as time has passed, so the available material has changed in nature and in scope. A couple of other questions, and I don't propose to go through the slides in too much detail. Addressed or unaddressed? Well, talk to one person, they'll tell you they should all be addressed. Another one will tell you, well, actually, I prefer mine unaddressed. Ideally, there's an ideal and there's a pragmatic. The ideal is, yeah, they should have gone through the mail. But in certain cases, there are different ways that the first aid covers may have been generated. And so truthfully, they may or may not have gone through the mail the way a normal letter might have. But again, my argument is you have to embrace all of the range and scope. And the key thing is that second last sentence, by the way. Covers which have transmitted through the Postal Service are best. It doesn't say they must. It says they are best. And I think one of the key things with the guidelines, if you try to make every guideline too strict, too black and white, it is not helpful. And given the range and scope of material, you have to exercise some flexibility. So, handwritten typed. Well, you can see, which would you prefer? I don't know, it depends on the individual. So, we've talked a little bit about first days, the history of them, the background. Now, you want to form a collection. How would you go about it? How would you do it? Well, you can do it for a single stamp issue. You can do it for individual designs. You can do it in different ways. A common design. You could form an exhibit, a collection of first day covers for the 1949 UPU issue. Common design. The stamps are basically the same design across all of the British colonies. That's one approach that you could adopt. You can see some of the covers have cachets, some don't. You take another topic, the 1946 victory. Some cached, some basically without a cachet. Again, a common topic. The topic is the thing that ties the first days together. The world united against malaria. 1960s, malaria was a big issue around the world. Many issues were produced by different countries, and you could form an exhibit around that as a topic. Chinese New Year. Increasingly now we get many new issues related to Chinese New Year. This again could be a basis for a common topic. Boy Scouts. Again, back in the 60s, there were quite a number of issues, including from Dubai itself, relating to Boy Scouts. Joint issues, a fairly recent phenomenon in terms of stamp production, but issues with a common design between different countries. And you can get first day covers associated with such joint issues. The one in the bottom left corner, joint issue between the US and Morocco. Again, the scope is very broad. The options are great. Now, how do you organize your collection? Again, there are different ways that you can approach the subject. And here are just some examples. Again, I don't propose to read through them. Those of you, if you're not on the back row, can probably read them for yourselves. But countries, periods, cachet makers, all of these different options that are available to you within collecting first day covers. Now, just to illustrate some of those different headings, a group of related countries, the Federation, eventually they became a federation, Northern Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia, and Nyasaland. They had a common issue in 1953 for the Rhodes Centenary Exhibition. Same design, different countries, first day covers. That is an example of a group of related countries with first day covers. Time period, you could take Canada from the 30s and the 40s. Again, just a few examples to show the point. You can take a cachet maker, this Floydal Design, US. Some of the most prolific, you said tens of thousands. Artcraft, well, they made hundreds of thousands of each different one. Fleetwood, again, a major US cachet maker. Type of postal item. Type of postal item. We have the Mulready. The Mulready issued coinciding with the penny black. This is examples of first days relating to postal stationery. Great Britain, Halfpenny postcard. Again, first day. And again, noted at the time, first issued 1870. Issued on the 1st of October, 1870. Stamped envelopes from the United States. US postal cards. Maximum cards. Maximum cards even have a place within first days. Balance, moderation. But there are maximum cards with first day related uses. First day covers as postal history. These are all covers used on the first day, but illustrating different facets of postal history. Again, showing to all of you the extensive range and scope of first day cover collecting. One of the other categories was themes, aircraft, birds, water birds, fish. Even, again, this connectivity between commercial and commemorative. The pharmaceutical companies back in the 1960s and early 70s used first day covers extensively in their marketing. Again, this could become a basis for collecting and studying the first days. Signatures of stamp designers. Now, again, to every rule there's an exception. Commemorative covers. Now this again was a gray area which had to be considered. There are many covers that look like a first day cover, but they are not first day covers. And here are 3 examples. They kind of look like first day covers. They have cachets, they have postmarks, they have stamps supplied. But in no case is the stamp related to a first day. And that's the key thing. These are commemorative covers. They are not first days. And that's, again, a distinction that you have to draw. Now, this, again, is where it gets complicated. In this case, the cachet and the postmark from Buckingham Palace, they relate to the Duke of Edinburgh's awards scheme. The stamps themselves were for Queen Elizabeth II's Silver Jubilee. They were issued on the 11th of May. So we have a first day cover with the stamps, with a postmark, but the cachet and the postmark are nothing to do with the issuance of the stamp. And this is where, again, knowledge and correct identification of the material, as with traditional, as with postal history, as with aerophilately, it's all the same. It's all the same. The principles are the same. Now again, another example of something that is what one would call a hybrid, really. The cachet is really relating to the APS stamp show in 2016, but it also coincides with the first day issuance of the stamp. So again, there are these things that have a foot in 2 different sections. Now, again, we talked about production material for the first day cover, the cachet. Well, associated with first day covers, there's also all sorts of additional materials which can appropriately be included in a collection or in an exhibit. And these are just 3 examples of different types of what they generally call paraphilatelic material. Postal announcements by the Malawi Post Office, Crown Agent's announcement of South Arabia, and for those of you who are Star Wars fans, the ASDA Mega Show in New York, the issuance of the 41-cent Yoda stamp. India, also an extensive range of publicity materials associated with stamp production. Korea also. The United States, one of the unique features of US issues are the first day ceremonies. They have the national anthem, they have speeches, they have the flag, they have all sorts of things. And associated with these, there are programs. And this is just an example of one of the programs for the Hawaiian issue, and actually is dedicated to Ryo Ishikawa, one of the most prominent US stamp collectors. That takes us to the end of part 1. What do I think I've done, apart from confuse you all, repeat myself extensively? I've tried to tell you that first day covers have a long history, a very extensive history. They are not just modern cachet covers. It's really a very broad and I think very interesting field for collecting. Now, the next part of the program, a friend of mine, Ying from China, will talk about his experience as a collector and as exhibitor of first day covers. His special collection is actually Scott number 906, the 5-cent US stamp for resistance to Japanese aggression. He will talk over Zoom, and assuming we can master the technology, it will probably work a little smoother than this. But I suggest that we take a 5-minute break so that those of you who want to go get coffee can. Those of you who want to sneak away and not come back can. And it'll also allow us to get the technology smoothed out so that we can start and move forward without any too many glitches. So thank you very much for coming. We'll see you again in 5 minutes or so.